Damien Caldwell's mansion stood like a fortress on the edge of a snow-covered mountain. The structure, all glass and steel, reflected the pale winter sun, casting jagged shadows onto the frosted ground. Inside, the silence was deafening, broken only by the mechanical hum of Damien's wheelchair as he maneuvered through his sterile, ultramodern prison. Damien stared out of the floor-to-ceiling windows, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the endless white horizon. The snowstorm raging outside mirrored the tempest within him. It had been 3 years since the accident, 3 years since his world collapsed. Now, his existence revolved around revenge. His company, his fortune, his brilliance, all useless in the confines of this wheelchair. But he still had his mind, and that was sharper than ever. The sound of the main door opening echoed through the vast mansion. Damien's AI assistant, a calm female voice, announced, "Ms. Sophia Devereaux has arrived." Damien turned his wheelchair, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "Right on time," he muttered, his tone carrying a mix of intrigue and skepticism. Sophia entered the main hall, her heels clicking on the polished marble floor. She was breathtaking, long, wavy brunette hair cascading over her shoulders, a striking figure wrapped in a tailored black coat, and eyes so piercing they seemed to challenge the very air in the room. But Damien didn't trust beauty. Beauty, he'd learned, often concealed daggers. "Mr. Caldwell," Sophia said, her voice steady but polite. She extended a hand, though her gaze betrayed her unease. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Damien let the moment linger, his wheelchair rolling closer. He didn't take her hand. Instead, he studied her, his eyes narrowing. "Sophia Devereaux," he said slowly, as if testing the weight of her name. "Pleasure is subjective. You're here to work." Sophia dropped her hand, her smile faltering. "Of course." He gestured toward the spacious living area, where a fire crackled in a sleek glass fireplace. "I don't like liars," he said bluntly, his gaze locked onto hers. "Everyone who enters my house has secrets, and I don't tolerate surprises." Sophia held his gaze, her composure unwavering. "I'm here to do my job, Mr. Caldwell. Nothing more." The air between them was taut, electric. Damien finally nodded. "We'll see." The first day passed in tense silence. Sophia familiarized herself with the mansion's labyrinthine layout, guided by the AI assistant. Every room was immaculate, but sterile, devoid of personal touches. It felt more like a museum than a home. Damien, meanwhile, observed her from a distance, his wheelchair silent as a predator stalking prey. He noted how her eyes lingered on certain areas, the locked study, the hidden cameras in the corners. She was curious, maybe too curious. That evening, as Sophia set a tray of dinner beside Damien, he broke the silence. "Why this job?" he asked, his voice cutting through the quiet. Sophia hesitated, her fingers tightening around the tray. "It's good money," she said carefully, "and I needed a change." "A change?" Damien echoed, his tone skeptical. "From what?" She didn't answer immediately, and that was all the confirmation Damien needed. Secrets. She had them, just like everyone else. He didn't press further, though. He knew secrets had a way of revealing themselves when the time was right. Later that night, Sophia retreated to her assigned room, a modest but elegant space at the far end of the mansion. She sat on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hands. A text message flashed on the screen. "You have 30 days. Don't forget why you're there." Her heart pounded as she locked the phone and tossed it onto the nightstand. The weight of her mission pressed down on her, suffocating. She glanced at the door, half expecting Damien to burst in, accusing her of treachery. But all she heard was the faint hum of the AI system and the howling wind outside. In his study, Damien stared at an encrypted file on his computer. The file contained the last remnants of evidence tying Victor Crow to his accident, evidence Damien couldn't yet crack. His jaw tightened as he remembered Victor's smug face, the betrayal, and the crash that shattered his life. He whispered to himself, "I'll bury you, Crow. Just wait." But for now, there was Sophia. Beautiful, enigmatic Sophia. She was more than she seemed, and Damien knew it. Whatever game she was playing, he would uncover it. After all, He'd played this game before, and he never lost. The morning sun cast a pale glow through the massive windows of Damien's mansion, reflecting off the snow-covered mountains. The brightness did little to dispel the tension that lingered in the air. Sophia moved quietly through the kitchen, her movements graceful but deliberate. She prepared Damien's breakfast, acutely aware of the camera perched high in the corner, its unblinking eye tracking her every step. Damien entered the room in his wheelchair, his sharp gaze immediately settling on her. "Good morning," he said, his voice laced with a mixture of civility and scrutiny. "Sleep well?" Sophia turned to face him, masking her unease with a polite smile. "Very well, thank you. It's quiet here." "Too quiet for someone like you, I'd imagine," Damien replied, his tone dripping with implication. Sophia stiffened, but forced her expression to remain neutral. "Someone like me?" He wheeled closer, his movements smooth and calculated. "Someone who looks as though they thrive on chaos." Sophia placed the plate of food in front of him without a word. Damien studied her in silence as he picked up his fork. The sound of the utensil against the plate seemed unnaturally loud, filling the space between them. Later that day, Damien tested her further. "Follow me," he said, leading her through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors. His AI assistant announced the opening of locked doors as they moved deeper into the house. Finally, they arrived at a sleek room dominated by a wall of monitors displaying live security feeds from around the property. "This is the nerve center," Damien explained, gesturing toward the monitors. "Everything in this house is monitored and recorded. I trust you understand the importance of discretion." Sophia nodded, though her stomach churned. She glanced at the feeds, noting the strategic angles and the absence of blind spots. "It's impressive," she said carefully. Damien leaned back in his wheelchair, his expression unreadable. "It's a necessity. When you've been betrayed by people you trusted, you learn to protect yourself." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Sophia avoided his gaze, her mind racing. Did he already suspect her? If he did, why keep her here? She needed to tread carefully. That night, Damien worked late in his study. His hands, the only parts of his body he could still move with precision, tapped away at his keyboard. He was sifting through layers of encrypted files, hoping to uncover the smoking gun that would finally expose Victor Crow's treachery. But progress was slow, and frustration gnawed at him. Suddenly, his AI assistant interrupted. Unusual activity detected in the West Wing. Camera 14 offline. Damien's eyes narrowed. "Pull up the last recorded footage." The monitor displayed a grainy image of Sophia walking down the corridor near the locked study. She paused briefly in front of the door, her fingers brushing against the handle before she moved on. Damien's jaw tightened. He leaned back in his chair, his mind churning. She was up to something. But what? And why? Meanwhile, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the text on her phone. "You're running out of time. We need that data." Her fingers trembled as she typed out a reply. "I'm working on it. He doesn't trust me yet." The response came almost immediately. "Make him, or we'll make you regret it." Sophia clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. The pressure was mounting, and she was caught between two equally dangerous men. Damien's icy demeanor and razor-sharp mind terrified her as much as the criminals threatening her family. She couldn't afford to fail either of them. The following day, Damien decided to test her further. During breakfast, he made his move. "I have a small project for you," he said casually, slicing into his omelet. "Think of it as part of your training." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What kind of project?" "There's a vault in the East Wing," Damien said, his tone measured. "I need an inventory taken. It's been a while since I've checked its contents." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. A vault? Was this the data her debtors wanted? "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'll take care of it." Damien watched her closely, his expression unreadable. "Good. The AI will guide you." Sophia approached the vault with trepidation. The AI assistant's voice was calm and reassuring as it directed her through the security protocols. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing rows of neatly organized shelves filled with documents, hard drives, and other items she didn't recognize. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the room. The temptation to take something, anything, was overwhelming, but she knew the risks. Damien was watching. He was always watching. Instead, she began the inventory, her hands trembling as she logged each item. Her mind raced, trying to decipher which piece of information might be the key to her survival. As she worked, she felt the weight of Damien's scrutiny, even though he wasn't physically there. Back in his study, Damien monitored her progress on the security feed. He noted her hesitation, the way her hands lingered over certain items. She was careful, but not careful enough. Damien smirked to himself. Sophia was playing a dangerous game, and she didn't even realize he'd already made his first move. Interesting, he murmured, leaning back in his chair. Very interesting. The snowstorm outside had subsided, leaving behind a crystalline blanket that sparkled in the weak morning sun. The mansion, however, remained as cold and unwelcoming as ever. Damien sat in his study, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace, his mind trapped in the past. 3 years earlier, Damien had been at the height of his power. As the visionary founder of Caldwell Tech, he had revolutionized AI security systems, earning himself billions and a reputation as a ruthless genius. But his greatest strength, trusting no one, had failed him when it mattered most. Victor Crow, his childhood friend and business partner, had betrayed him in the most devastating way. They'd been working on a cutting-edge encryption software when Victor sold the prototype to a rival company. The betrayal led to a heated confrontation, culminating in a mysterious car accident that left Damien paralyzed and Victor unscathed. Damien's fiancée, Elena, had been in the passenger seat that night. She didn't survive. The memory of her lifeless body haunted him, a constant reminder of what he'd lost. Victor took everything from me, Damien muttered to himself, his voice low and venomous. But he didn't take my mind. Sophia's footsteps echoed down the corridor as she approached the study. She hesitated at the door, gathering her composure before knocking lightly. "Come in," Damien called, his voice devoid of warmth. Sophia stepped inside, carrying a tray with his coffee. She placed it on the desk in front of him, her movements careful, almost submissive. Damien noticed the subtle tension in her posture, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly as she adjusted the cup. "Tell me something, Ms. Devereaux," Damien said, breaking the silence. "Why did you really take this job?" Sophia's breath caught. She quickly masked her surprise, but Damien's sharp eyes didn't miss the flicker of panic that crossed her face. "I told you," she said evenly. "It's good money, and I needed a change." Damien leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "People don't come here for the money. They come because they're running from something, or someone. So, which is it?" Sophia's heart pounded, but she held his gaze, refusing to let him see her fear. "I don't know what you're talking about." For a moment, Damien said nothing. Then, he leaned back in his wheelchair, his expression unreadable. "You're a good liar, I'll give you that. But everyone's truth comes out eventually." Sophia swallowed hard. The weight of his words lingered as she excused herself from the room. Alone in her room, Sophia paced back and forth, clutching her phone. Another message from her debtors had arrived. "We're losing patience. Get the data, or we come for your brother." She wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, but she couldn't afford any missteps. She thought of Damien's locked vault, the countless security cameras, and the man himself, sharp, calculating, and always one step ahead. "He knows," she whispered to herself. "He has to know." Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, burying her face in her hands. She had never felt so trapped. Her mission, her family, Damien's scrutiny, it was all too much. Meanwhile, in a luxurious penthouse across the city, Victor Crow watched the snow fall through a wall of glass. He held a glass of bourbon in one hand and his phone in the other, smirking as he reviewed a security breach report from Damien's mansion. "Still holding on to your secrets, Damien?" Victor mused, taking a slow sip. "Don't worry. I'll take care of that soon enough." He dialed a number. When the line connected, his voice turned cold and authoritative. "Step up the pressure. I want that woman to deliver. If she fails, eliminate her, and anyone who gets in the way. Back in his study, Damien pored over encrypted files late into the night. His hands moved with precision, his sharp mind piecing together fragments of data. He was getting closer to the truth, to the evidence he needed to destroy Victor once and for all. But something didn't add up. The accident, Victor's betrayal, Elena's death. It all felt too calculated, too deliberate. Why would Victor risk everything? Damien muttered, his fingers pausing over the keyboard. He stared at the screen, his mind racing. What was he trying to gain? The answer eluded him, but Damien knew one thing for certain. Sophia was the key. The next day, Sophia found herself drawn back to the vault. She stood in front of the door, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. The AI assistant's voice broke the silence. Access denied. Authorization required. Sophia's heart raced. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Damien to appear out of nowhere. But the corridor was empty. She pulled back her hand, shaking her head. Not yet, she whispered. For now. She would wait. But time was running out, and she knew her window of opportunity was closing fast. Damien watched the security feed from his study, his expression dark. He saw Sophia lingering outside the vault, her hesitation, her conflict. She's not just curious, Damien said to himself. She's looking for something. A slow smile spread across his face. But it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was a smile of anticipation. Let's see how far you're willing to go, Miss Devereaux. The wind howled against the mansion's walls, a chilling backdrop to the tension brewing inside. Damien sat in the living room, his expression as cold as the storm outside. Sophia entered cautiously, sensing the air around him was charged with unspoken hostility. Ms. Devereaux, Damien said, his tone clipped. Join me. Sophia hesitated but forced a smile and sat down across from him. Damien's icy gaze met hers, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. For a moment, the only sound was the crackling fire in the sleek, glass-enclosed hearth. I'm curious, Damien began, his voice deceptively calm. What do you think of trust? Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the question. Trust? She repeated, buying herself a moment to think. It's important, I suppose. In any relationship. Important, Damien echoed, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. And yet so fragile. One small lie, one hidden agenda, and it shatters. Sophia shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. Is there a reason you're bringing this up? Damien leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. There's always a reason, Ms. Devereaux. I just wonder if you'll admit yours. Sophia left the room feeling like she had just stepped off a tightrope. Damien's words clung to her like a second skin, making her question every move she'd made since stepping into this house. She paced her room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, when another text arrived from her debtors. Time's up. Get us what we need or your brother dies tonight. Sophia's heart pounded. She couldn't let her brother pay the price for her failure. But the more time she spent with Damien, the harder it became to betray him. The text was followed by an image, a photo of her brother tied to a chair, fear etched into his face. Tears welled in her eyes as she typed a single reply. I'll get it tonight. In the privacy of his study, Damien watched Sophia on the security feed. Her anguished expression, the way she clutched her phone, and her whispered words to herself painted a vivid picture. Who are you talking to, Ms. Devereaux? Damien muttered. He accessed her phone's outgoing signals through the mansion's security system, bypassing encryption with ease. The messages she'd sent and received lit up his screen. His jaw tightened as he read the threats against her brother. Interesting, Damien said, leaning back in his chair. So, you're not working for Victor. At least not directly. But her debtor's demands didn't absolve her. They only made her more dangerous. Damien wasn't about to let his guard down. That night, Sophia made her move. The house was quiet, the storm outside masking her footsteps as she crept toward the vault. The AI assistant's voice startled her as she approached. Unauthorized access detected. Please provide credentials. Sophia froze, her heart racing. She didn't have credentials, but she prepared for this. She pulled a small device from her pocket, a signal jammer given to her by her debtors. She pressed it against the keypad, and the AI assistant's voice fell silent. The vault door hissed as it unlocked. Sophia slipped inside, her breath catching at the sight of shelves filled with hard drives, documents, and a single locked briefcase. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the briefcase and a hard drive, tucking them into her bag. As she turned to leave, a voice stopped her in her tracks. Going somewhere? Sophia whirled around to find Damien sitting in his wheelchair at the entrance, his eyes cold and unyielding. The confrontation. I was just, Sophia stammered, her mind racing for an excuse. Spare me the lies, Damien interrupted, his voice sharp. I know everything. Sophia's blood ran cold. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Damien said, rolling closer. You're working for someone. They're threatening you. Your brother, isn't it? Sophia's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to do this. They'll kill him if I don't deliver. Damien studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her shock, he rolled back slightly and gestured toward the items in her bag. Take it, he said. Sophia blinked, stunned. What? Take it, Damien repeated, his tone icy. Let them think you've succeeded. But when they try to use it, they'll find nothing but a digital noose tightening around their necks. Sophia's mind reeled. You mean, you're letting me go? Damien's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. No, Ms. Devereaux. You're staying right here. You and I aren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Sophia returned to her room, shaken but oddly relieved. She stared at the stolen items in her bag, wondering what Damien had planned. In his study, Damien watched the security feed again, his mind racing. Sophia's betrayal was just a symptom of the larger disease, Victor's web of manipulation. And now, Damien had an even bigger card to play in his game of revenge. Let's see how far this goes, he murmured to himself. It's time to bring Victor into the fold. The following morning dawned gray and bitterly cold, the storm clouds still heavy in the sky. Inside the mansion, the tension had grown palpable. Sophia kept to herself, avoiding Damien's icy gaze. But she could feel his presence everywhere. His silence was more unnerving than his questions. She knew he was waiting for her to make a move. Damien sat in his study, watching the security feeds as Sophia moved about the house. He'd given her the illusion of freedom, but in reality, she was ensnared in his trap. The items she'd taken from the vault were decoys, each embedded with tracking software and false data designed to lead her debtors straight into a digital ambush. Let's see how desperate they really are, Damien muttered, his fingers tapping the armrest of his wheelchair. The AI assistant's voice interrupted his thoughts. Incoming communication from Victor Crow. Damien's jaw tightened. He hadn't heard Victor's voice in months, but the name alone sent a surge of anger through him. He accepted the call, his expression hardening as Victor's smug face appeared on the screen. Damien, Victor drawled, his tone dripping with false charm. How's life in your little fortress? Cut to the chase, Victor, Damien said coldly. What do you want? Victor's grin widened. Oh, just checking in. I heard you've been busy, new staff, new projects. You're quite resilient for a man in your condition. Damien's grip on the armrest tightened. Is that all? Not quite, Victor said, his tone darkening. I know about your little house guest. Let's just say, she and I have mutual interests. Damien's eyes narrowed. Stay out of my affairs, Victor. Victor's laughter echoed through the room. Oh, Damien, you know I never do. The call ended abruptly, leaving Damien seething. Victor's cryptic words confirmed what he'd suspected. Sophia wasn't just a pawn for her debtors. She was part of Victor's larger scheme. And Damien wasn't about to let Victor win. Sophia stood in her room, staring at the briefcase she'd stolen from the vault. She hadn't dared open it, knowing Damien would be watching. Her phone buzzed, and she snatched it up, her heart sinking as she read the message. We have your brother. No more excuses. Deliver now. Her hands trembled as she typed a reply. I need more time. The response was immediate. No more time. If you fail, he dies. Tears blurred her vision as she paced the room, clutching the phone like a lifeline. She needed to act, but Damien's looming presence made every move feel like a step closer to disaster. Finally, she steeled herself and left the room, determined to confront him. Sophia found Damien in the living room, staring out at the snow-covered mountains. His wheelchair was positioned near the fireplace, the flickering flames casting shadows across his face. "I need to talk to you," Sophia said, her voice trembling. Damien turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Go on." Sophia hesitated, then took a deep breath. "They have my brother. The people I'm working for. They're holding him hostage. They're forcing me to steal from you." Damien said nothing, his gaze fixed on her. The silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. "I didn't have a choice," Sophia continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you, but they'll kill him if I don't deliver." Damien finally spoke, his tone sharp and cold. "And you thought I wouldn't notice? That I'd let you waltz out of here with my secrets?" "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please, I need your help." Damien studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her shock, he nodded. "Fine." Sophia blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "You'll help me?" Damien's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "I'll help you, but not for your sake. For mine." Hours later, the mansion's AI assistant alerted Damien to an incoming video feed. The screen in his study flickered to life, revealing Victor's face once again. This time, Victor wasn't alone. Behind him stood Sophia's brother, tied to a chair, his face bruised and bloodied. "Damien," Victor said, his tone mockingly sympathetic. "We seem to have a little problem. Your lovely caretaker has been holding out on us." Damien's jaw tightened. "Let him go, Victor." Victor chuckled. "Oh, Damien, you know how this works. You give me what I want, and maybe the boy gets to live. But if you don't, well, accidents happen." Damien's mind raced. He couldn't let Victor win, but he also couldn't let Sophia's brother die. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. Damien turned to Sophia, who stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale with fear. "Do exactly as I say," he commanded. "No deviations, no hesitation." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding. "What's the plan?" Damien's expression darkened. "We're going to give Victor exactly what he wants, and then we're going to destroy him." As Damien began outlining his plan, a flicker of doubt crossed Sophia's mind. She wanted to trust him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a game she didn't fully understand. And in this game, there were no guarantees. Damien, meanwhile, was already 2 steps ahead. He knew Victor wouldn't go down easily, and he knew Sophia wasn't telling him everything. But for now, he needed her. And when the time came, he would decide whether to trust her, or to turn the tables once and for all. The storm outside the mansion had softened to a quiet snowfall, but inside, the tension between Damien and Sophia felt like a blizzard waiting to erupt. Damien had spent the last hour meticulously explaining his plan to Sophia, his voice calm but laced with an edge of authority. She sat across from him in the study, her hands clasped tightly together, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "We're going to let Victor think he's won," Damien began, his sharp eyes locked on Sophia's. "You're going to deliver the data he wants. At least, that's what he'll believe." Sophia's brow furrowed. "But if I give him fake data, won't he realize it's a trap?" "Not immediately," Damien replied. "The files you took from the vault were decoys. They're rigged with a Trojan program that will infiltrate Victor's system the moment he accesses them. Once it's in, I'll have full access to his network." "And then what?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. "Then," Damien said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm, "we dismantle everything he's built." As Damien outlined the details, Sophia's mind raced. She wanted to believe in his plan, but doubts gnawed at her. What if it failed? What if Victor retaliated before they could execute the trap? And then there was Damien himself, cold, calculating, and impossible to read. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was using her as a pawn, just like everyone else in her life had. "You don't trust me," Damien said suddenly, breaking into her thoughts. Sophia blinked, startled. What? You're second-guessing everything I'm telling you, Damien said, his tone flat. I can see it in your eyes. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Can you blame me? You've been playing mind games with me since I got here. Damien's lips twitched into a faint smirk. Fair enough. But remember this. If I wanted to destroy you, I already would have. The statement hung in the air, a chilling reminder of Damien's power. That evening, Sophia prepared for her meeting with Victor's men. Damien watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. You need to be convincing, he said. They can't suspect you're working with me. Sophia nodded, pulling on a long black coat. I'll do my best. Damien's eyes lingered on her for a moment. Sophia, he said quietly, if something goes wrong, you get out. Don't try to be a hero. Sophia turned to face him, surprised by the softness in his voice. Why do you care? Damien didn't answer. Instead, he rolled his wheelchair back into the shadows, leaving her with 1,000 unanswered questions. Sophia arrived at the designated location, a dimly lit parking garage on the outskirts of the city. The cold air bit at her skin as she approached a group of men standing near a sleek black car. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. You've got the package? He asked, his voice rough. Sophia nodded and handed him the briefcase. Her heart pounded as he opened it, revealing the hard drives inside. The man examined them for a moment, then gave a satisfied nod. Good, he said. You've bought yourself a little more time. Where's my brother? Sophia demanded, her voice shaking. The man smirked. You'll see him soon enough, if you keep cooperating. Sophia clenched her fists but said nothing. She couldn't afford to lose her composure now. Back at the mansion, Damien monitored the exchange through a hidden transmitter embedded in the briefcase. His fingers flew over the keyboard, activating the Trojan program as soon as the hard drives were connected to Victor's system. Got you, he muttered as lines of code filled his screen. The program was working perfectly, giving Damien access to Victor's files. He began sifting through them, searching for the evidence he needed to destroy his nemesis. But then, something unexpected happened. A secondary layer of encryption activated, blocking Damien's access. A message flashed across his screen. Nice try, Damien. Damien's jaw tightened. Victor, he hissed. The scene shifted to Victor's penthouse, where he sat at his desk, a glass of bourbon in hand. He watched the data transfer from the briefcase with a satisfied smirk. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this, Damien? Victor muttered to himself. He turned to one of his men. Double the security on our network. I want eyes on Caldwell's every move. The man nodded and left the room. Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression darkening. Let's see how far you're willing to go, old friend. Sophia returned to the mansion, her body trembling from the cold and the stress of the meeting. Damien was waiting for her in the living room, his expression unreadable. They took the bait, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien nodded. Good. But Victor's already countered. He's smarter than I gave him credit for. Sophia's heart sank. So, what now? Damien's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Now, we escalate. As Sophia turned to leave, Damien's voice stopped her. Sophia, he said, his tone softer than she expected. Thank you. Sophia froze, surprised. For what? For trusting me, Damien said, even when you had every reason not to. Sophia didn't respond. She simply nodded and walked away, her mind swirling with doubt and fear. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just fighting for her brother's life. She was caught in a battle far bigger than herself. The mansion was cloaked in an unsettling silence, broken only by the faint hum of Damien's AI assistant and the soft crackle of the fireplace. Sophia sat in the corner of the living room, staring into the flames, her thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. Damien was watching her, as he always seemed to be, his expression unreadable. Sophia, Damien said, breaking the silence. His voice was softer than she expected, almost gentle. Are you all right? She looked up, startled. What? You've been staring at the fire for the past 20 minutes, Damien said, wheeling his chair closer. "What's on your mind?" Sophia hesitated. The last few days had been a nightmare, a constant cycle of lies, fear, and manipulation. She didn't know if she could trust Damien, but something in his tone made her drop her guard, if only for a moment. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of what's going to happen. Scared of losing my brother. Scared of everything." Damien's gaze softened, and for the first time, Sophia saw a flicker of something human beneath his cold exterior. "Fear can be a powerful motivator," he said, "but it can also destroy you if you let it." Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," Damien said firmly. "You've survived this long. That takes strength." The conversation shifted into an unexpected intimacy. Damien began to open up, sharing fragments of his past, his rise to success, his betrayal by Victor, and the guilt he carried over Elena's death. "She was the one person I thought I could trust," Damien said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "But even she had secrets." Sophia listened intently, her heart aching for him. She realized that, beneath his armor of cynicism, Damien was a man haunted by loss and betrayal. In that moment, she felt a connection, a fragile thread of understanding that bound them together. "Damien," she said softly, "I'm sorry for what I've done. I never wanted to hurt you." He looked at her, his piercing blue eyes searching hers. "I believe you," he said after a long pause, "but trust has to be earned." The room grew quiet again, the air between them thick with unspoken emotions. Damien reached out, his hand brushing against hers. Sophia's breath caught as he leaned closer, his movements deliberate despite his wheelchair's limitations. And then it happened, a kiss, soft and tentative, yet charged with an intensity that neither of them expected. For a brief moment, the walls they'd both built around themselves crumbled, and they allowed themselves to feel something other than fear and anger. But the moment was fleeting. Sophia pulled back, her heart racing. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not like this." Damien's expression hardened, but he didn't press her. "I understand," he said simply. Sophia stood abruptly, her emotions in turmoil. "I need some air," she muttered, hurrying out of the room before Damien could say anything more. While Sophia wrestled with her feelings, Damien's security system alerted him to an intrusion. The AI assistant's voice broke the quiet. "External breach detected. West perimeter compromised." Damien's jaw tightened. "Show me." The monitor displayed a group of masked intruders cutting through the fence surrounding the property. Damien recognized their uniforms. They were Victor's men. His pulse quickened as he issued commands to the AI. "Lock down the mansion. Alert the authorities." But before the AI could respond, the intruders hacked into the system, disabling the external defenses. The screen flickered, and Victor's face appeared. "Hello, Damien," Victor said with a chilling smile. "Enjoying my little surprise?" Damien's fist clenched. "What do you want, Victor?" Victor's smile widened. "You know what I want. Surrender the files, or I'll turn your fortress into a tomb." The screen went dark, leaving Damien seething with rage. Sophia re-entered the mansion just as the lockdown initiated. The sound of heavy metal shutters slamming into place echoed through the halls. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice laced with panic. "Victor's men are here," Damien said curtly. "He's escalated the game." Sophia's heart sank. "What do we do?" Damien's gaze was steely. "We fight." Damien guided Sophia to the security room, where he began coordinating their defense. He handed her a headset and issued clear instructions. "You'll need to follow my lead. No deviations." Sophia nodded, adrenaline surging through her veins. Together, they worked to outmaneuver Victor's men, using the mansion's remaining defenses to buy time. Damien's sharp mind and Sophia's quick thinking proved to be a formidable combination. As the intruders retreated, Damien turned to Sophia, his expression grim. "This is only the beginning," he said. "Victor won't stop until he gets what he wants." Sophia nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we don't let him win." For the first time, Damien allowed himself a small smile. "Maybe I was right about you after all." Sophia's heart swelled with a mix of determination and fear. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was no longer just a pawn in this game. She was a player. As Sophia left the room, Damien's smile faded. He stared at the monitor displaying Victor's retreating men, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia was still hiding something, and he was determined to find out what it was. In her room, Sophia clutched her phone, a new message lighting up the screen. "You've made your choice. There's no turning back now." Her fingers trembled as she deleted the message, knowing that the real battle had only just begun. The snow had ceased falling, leaving an eerie stillness over the mansion. Inside, the tension between Damien and Sophia had reached its breaking point. Damien's suspicions of Sophia's motives had grown, and Sophia, grappling with guilt and fear, felt the weight of her lies suffocating her. Both knew the fragile alliance they had formed was teetering on the edge of collapse. Damien summoned Sophia to his study that morning. She hesitated outside the door, her heart racing. Before pushing it open, he was seated behind his desk, his eyes fixed on a tablet displaying security feeds. "Sophia," he said, not looking up, "close the door." Her hands trembled as she obeyed. "What is it?" she asked, her voice strained. Damien finally met her gaze, his expression icy. "Sit." Sophia sank into the chair across from him, her stomach churning. Damien slid the tablet across the desk, showing a still frame of her from the security footage in front of the vault. "Care to explain this?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Sophia's breath hitched. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Damien leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. "No more lies." Sophia's mind raced. She couldn't lie anymore. He'd see right through her. Taking a shaky breath, she began to speak. "They have my brother," she said, her voice trembling. "Victor's men. They're threatening to kill him if I don't get them what they want." Damien's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest of his wheelchair. "Go on." Sophia hesitated, then continued. "When I came here, I thought I could do it, steal the data and walk away. But I didn't know. I didn't know you were." She trailed off, her tears spilling over. "I didn't expect you to be so human." Damien scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Human," he repeated, his tone bitter. "What a generous assessment." "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you." Damien studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Do you even know what you've taken?" he asked finally. Sophia shook her head. "No. They just said it was important." Damien exhaled sharply, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Important," he said, his voice rising. "That important data is the only evidence I have to destroy Victor. Do you understand what you've done?" Before Sophia could respond, the AI assistant interrupted. "Incoming communication from Victor Crow." Damien's eyes darkened. "Put it through." The screen on the wall flickered to life, revealing Victor's smug face. He leaned back in his chair, his expression gleeful. "Damien," Victor said, his tone mocking, "I see you've been busy." And Sophia, "What a pleasant surprise. You've done well." Sophia's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Victor's grin widened. "Did you really think I'd let you walk away after this?" "Oh, Sophia, you've served your purpose, but your usefulness is over." "No," Sophia whispered, shaking her head. "You promised." "I lied," Victor said coldly. "Your brother? He's already dead." Sophia gasped, the color draining from her face. "You're lying," she said, her voice barely audible. Victor's laughter was cruel and mocking. "Believe what you want, my dear, but you should have known better than to trust me." Damien's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Enough." Victor turned his attention back to Damien, his expression smug. "Oh, don't worry, old friend. You're next." The screen went dark, leaving a suffocating silence in its wake. Sophia collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Damien wheeled closer, his expression a mixture of anger and something else, pity. "He's lying," Damien said, his voice firm. "He's trying to break you." Sophia shook her head, her tears falling freely. "I've lost everything," she whispered. "I've lost him." Damien reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Not yet," he said. "We still have a chance to make this right." Sophia looked up at Damien, her eyes red and swollen. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Damien's jaw tightened. "Because Victor took everything from me too. If we don't stop him, he'll keep destroying lives." Sophia nodded, a spark of determination igniting in her chest. "What do we do?" Damien's gaze hardened. "We fight back." As Damien and Sophia began formulating their next move, the mansion's AI assistant alerted them to another breach. External threat detected. Multiple hostiles approaching. Damien's fist clenched. He's not wasting any time. Sophia's heart pounded as Damien began issuing commands to the AI, activating every remaining defense system in the mansion. "We hold them off," Damien said, his voice steady. "And then we take the fight to him." Sophia nodded, her fear giving way to resolve. For the first time, she felt like she had a purpose, and she wasn't going to let Victor win. As the alarms blared and the mansion prepared for battle, Damien glanced at Sophia. "Whatever happens," he said, "stay close to me." Sophia nodded, but a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. She couldn't help but wonder, was Damien protecting her, or was he simply using her as another piece in his game of revenge? And deep down, she knew the answer might destroy them both. The mansion's alarms wailed like a cry of war as Damien and Sophia braced for the assault. Victor's men were closing in, their shadows creeping closer on the perimeter cameras. Damien's calm demeanor was a sharp contrast to Sophia's racing heart. "Stay here," Damien commanded, his voice firm as steel. "No," Sophia shot back, her fear overshadowed by resolve. "I'm not hiding while you risk everything." Damien's piercing gaze softened momentarily before he nodded. "Then listen to me carefully. We have one chance to turn this around." The intruders breached the outer defenses within minutes, storming through the mansion's high-tech corridors. Damien, from his control center, used every available system to slow them down, locking doors, deploying automated defenses, and activating traps hidden in the walls. Explosions and gunfire echoed through the house, but the attackers kept advancing. Sophia followed Damien's orders to the letter, moving through the labyrinthine halls with precision, setting decoys and triggering countermeasures. She had never been in a situation like this, but fear gave her clarity. "On your left." Damien's voice barked through her earpiece, and she ducked just as a spray of bullets shattered a glass panel behind her. She rolled into cover, her hands trembling as she reached for the small weapon Damien had given her earlier. "Breathe." "Sophia," Damien said, his tone steady. "You can do this." She exhaled and peeked around the corner, firing at the advancing attackers. One fell, and the others hesitated, giving her just enough time to escape. While Damien and Sophia fought to hold the mansion, Victor's men set up a command post outside. Victor himself sat in a bulletproof SUV parked on a hill overlooking the property, watching the chaos unfold through live drone feeds. "This is taking too long," Victor muttered, his patience wearing thin. "Finish it." His lieutenant nodded and issued new orders. Moments later, a small team carrying explosives broke away from the main group and headed straight for the mansion's power supply. Back inside, Damien saw the breach on his monitors. His expression darkened as he realized what Victor was planning. "They're going for the generators," he told Sophia. "If they take out the power, we lose everything. Tell me how to stop them." Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Damien hesitated for a moment before giving her the instructions. "There's a service hatch on the lower level. You can cut them off there. But Sophia, be careful." Sophia descended into the lower levels, the cold, industrial corridors a stark contrast to the sleek luxury above. The hum of the generators grew louder as she approached, and she spotted the intruders setting charges on the equipment. Her hands shook as she aimed her weapon. She had never killed anyone before, and the weight of the decision pressed down on her like a vice. But as she thought of her brother, of Damien's trust, and of Victor's cruelty, something inside her snapped. She fired. hitting one of the men square in the chest. The others turned, but she didn't hesitate. Within seconds, all three lay motionless, and the generator room was safe. Sophia staggered back against the wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had done it. She had saved the mansion. But the realization of what she had done left her shaken to the core. When Sophia returned to the control center, Damien was waiting for her. The relief on his face was unmistakable, but it quickly turned to suspicion as he noticed something in her expression. "What happened?" he asked. "I stopped them," Sophia said, her voice hollow. "They won't touch the generators." Damien nodded, his sharp eyes scanning her face. "Good, but something's wrong. What aren't you telling me?" Before she could respond, the AI assistant interrupted. "Unauthorized access detected in the vault." Damien's head snapped toward the screen, and his expression darkened. "Victor," he hissed. Sophia felt her stomach drop. "What?" "He must have hacked the backup system," Damien said, wheeling toward the monitors. "He's bypassing the vault security remotely." As Damien worked to counter the breach, Sophia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and froze. A message from Victor. "Make your move now, or the mansion burns." Sophia's hands trembled as she stared at the message. Victor had played her from the beginning, using her to weaken Damien's defenses. And now, with the mansion on the brink of destruction, she had to make an impossible choice: stay loyal to Damien or save herself. Sophia made her decision. She grabbed the briefcase from the vault, the one she had stolen days earlier, and ran toward the front entrance. Damien's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Sophia, where are you going?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart pounded as she reached the entrance, where Victor's men were waiting. She handed over the briefcase, her hands trembling. "I did what you asked," she said, her voice cracking. "Now let us go." Victor's men smirked but said nothing. They turned and retreated into the night, leaving Sophia standing alone in the snow. Back inside, Damien watched her betrayal unfold on the security feed. His chest tightened, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to heartbreak. He had trusted her, and she had betrayed him, just like everyone else. When Sophia returned to the mansion, Damien was waiting for her. His expression was cold, his eyes filled with a fury that sent shivers down her spine. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Again." "Damien, she began, but he cut her off. "Save it," he snapped. "I know exactly what you've done, and now, so will Victor." Sophia's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Damien's lips curled into a grim smile. The briefcase wasn't just a decoy. It was a trap. Victor thinks he's won, but when he opens it, he'll find more than he bargained for. Sophia stared at him, her mind reeling. "You plan this?" "Victor's men will be back," he said. "And when they come, we'll be ready." Sophia nodded, but the weight of her actions pressed heavily on her. She had betrayed Damien, but she had also unwittingly become part of his plan. Now, as the storm loomed on the horizon, she realized there was no turning back. The night pressed on, heavy and cold. The storm outside mirrored the storm brewing within the mansion's walls. Damien sat in his control room, his eyes locked on the monitors displaying the aftermath of Victor's latest move. Sophia stood nearby, her arms wrapped around herself, the weight of her betrayal palpable in the silence. "You said the briefcase was a trap," Sophia said finally, breaking the silence. "What did you mean?" Damien didn't look at her. His fingers danced over the keyboard, lines of code cascading across the screens. "The files Victor's men took are embedded with a virus," he said. "The moment he tries to access them, it will corrupt his entire network. Everything he's built will be destroyed." Sophia exhaled sharply, a mix of relief and dread coursing through her. "And what happens next?" Damien turned to her, his eyes cold and unyielding. "We finish this." In his penthouse, Victor lounged in his chair, savoring a glass of bourbon as he watched his team decrypt the stolen files. The room buzzed with activity as his hackers worked feverishly. "Almost there," one of them said, his voice triumphant. Victor smirked. "Good. Once I have what I need, Caldwell is finished." The screen flickered, and Victor's smirk vanished. Lines of red code filled the monitor, and one by one, the other screens in the room went dark. "What the hell is this?" Victor barked, leaping to his feet. "It's a virus," the hacker stammered. "It's wiping everything. Servers, backups, everything." Victor's face twisted with rage. "Damien," he growled. Back at the mansion, Damien watched Victor's meltdown through a hacked feed. A grim smile tugged at his lips as he leaned back in his wheelchair. "He knows," Damien said. "And now, he'll come for us." Sophia's heart pounded. "You planned for this?" Damien nodded. "Victor's pride won't let him walk away. He'll want revenge. But this time, we're ready." As if on cue, the AI assistant announced, "Hostiles approaching. ETA, 20 minutes. Damien turned to Sophia. "We hold the line. This ends tonight." Victor's convoy arrived at the mansion under the cover of darkness. Headlights cutting through the snow. Armed men poured out of the vehicles, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. They moved with precision, their leader barking orders as they approached the mansion. Inside, Damien and Sophia prepared for the assault. The mansion's remaining defenses were activated, and Damien guided Sophia through the final steps of their plan. "Stay close to me," Damien said. "No heroics." Sophia nodded, gripping the small handgun he had given her. "I'm ready." The first wave of attackers breached the outer perimeter, triggering hidden explosives that sent snow and debris flying. The chaos disoriented them, giving Damien and Sophia a crucial advantage. From the control room, Damien directed automated turrets to thin their ranks while Sophia secured key access points. As the attackers pushed deeper into the mansion, the battle reached a fever pitch. Sophia found herself face-to-face with one of Victor's men, her hands shaking as she aimed her weapon. The man lunged at her, and they grappled, her training giving way to raw instinct. She managed to pull the trigger, the deafening sound echoing in her ears as the man collapsed. Meanwhile, Victor himself stormed through the mansion, his fury driving him forward. He reached the control room and confronted Damien, his face a mask of rage. "Caldwell," Victor roared, pointing a gun at Damien. "You think you've won?" Damien met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't think. I know." Victor sneered. "You're nothing without your empire. And now, I'll take even that from you." Before Victor could pull the trigger, Sophia appeared behind him, her weapon trained on his head. "Drop it," she commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Victor hesitated, then smirked. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," Sophia said, her finger tightening on the trigger. Victor dropped his weapon, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Looks like I underestimated you, Caldwell," he said, his tone mocking. "You always did," Damien replied, his voice cold. "And that's why you've already lost." Damien activated a final command on his system, broadcasting Victor's crimes to law enforcement and the media. Evidence of his embezzlement, corporate sabotage, and ties to organized crime flooded the airwaves. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. "You're finished," Damien said, his voice laced with satisfaction. Victor glared at him, his defiance faltering as the realization of his defeat sank in. He lunged for Damien in a desperate bid for control, but Sophia stepped between them, knocking him to the ground. Moments later, law enforcement stormed the mansion, arresting Victor and his remaining men. Damien watched as Victor was dragged away, his expression unreadable. The mansion was eerily quiet once the authorities left. Sophia sat beside Damien in the control room, her body exhausted but her mind racing. "It's over," she said, more to herself than to Damien. "For now," Damien replied, his gaze fixed on the snow-covered horizon. Sophia looked at him, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Damien turned to her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Victor may be gone, but the world is full of people like him. This isn't the end." Sophia nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his words. "So what happens now?" Damien's lips curved into a faint smile. "Now, we rebuild, and we prepare." As Sophia stood to leave, Damien called after her. "Sophia." She turned, her expression questioning. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Sophia nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that Damien was hiding something. Something that could change everything. In the control room, Damien stared at the screen displaying Victor's cryptic final words before his arrest. "This doesn't end with me." Damien's expression hardened. The game wasn't over. It was only just beginning.